"I will be yours if you find my ring," said the Apache. She never expected him to do it. Samantha had always loved the quiet of the woods near her small town. Every weekend, she would walk along the narrow paths that twisted between tall trees, listen to the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, and watch the sunlight dance on the surface of the creek that ran through the forest. It was her escape from the busy, noisy world of school and work, a place where she could think, dream, and just be herself. But on this particular Saturday, her peaceful routine was about to take an unexpected turn. That morning, Samantha had been cleaning out her small apartment, dusting shelves and organizing old boxes she had kept since childhood. In one of the boxes, she found a small velvet pouch. Inside lay a delicate gold ring with a tiny sapphire set in the center. She held it carefully in her hand, feeling a strange mix of joy and nostalgia. This ring had belonged to her grandmother, who had passed away years ago, and it carried with it a history that Samantha could feel but never fully understand. She always wore it on special days, like birthdays or family gatherings, as if having it on her finger connected her to her grandmother and to the memories of simpler times. That morning, Samantha decided she wanted to spend some time in the woods before the sun got too high. She tucked the ring safely in her pocket, slipped on her boots, and set out along the familiar trail that led toward the creek. Birds sang in the trees, their songs mixing with the faint sound of rushing water. She breathed deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs, and smiled. For a moment, all her worries seemed far away. As she walked, Samantha noticed the creek sparkling in the sunlight. The water was higher than usual because of recent rains, and it rushed over the rocks with a gentle roar. She moved closer to the edge, wanting to watch the water swirl around the stones and fallen branches. She took a step onto a mossy rock, trying to find the perfect angle to look into the water. But the rock was slippery. In an instant, her foot slipped, and she stumbled, catching herself against a tree branch. In the chaos, she felt something fall from her pocket. Her heart stopped. She looked down, but it was too late. The ring had slipped from her fingers and disappeared into the fast-flowing water. Samantha's first reaction was disbelief. She stared at the water, hoping that somehow it had just bounced onto another rock or floated to the edge where she could reach it. But the creek's current was strong, and the ring was gone. Panic rose in her chest. This wasn't just any ring. It was her grandmother's, a piece of her family's history, something irreplaceable. She knelt at the edge of the water, stretching her hand as far as she could, but the water was too cold, too fast. Her fingers met only the smooth, wet stones, and the ring was nowhere to be seen. For a long moment she sat on the bank, feeling helpless. Her eyes followed the ripples downstream, imagining the ring tumbling over rocks and disappearing into places she couldn't reach. She felt a sudden wave of grief, not just for the ring, but for the connection it represented. It was as if a small part of her past had been washed away with the water. She tried to calm herself, telling herself she could always find a way to replace it, but she knew deep down that this was impossible. No other ring would have the same story, the same memories, or the same weight of love. As she sat there trying to think, she heard footsteps approaching along the path behind her. She looked up and saw a young man walking toward her. He had dark hair, a calm presence, and carried himself with a quiet confidence. Samantha didn't know him, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel she could trust him. He stopped a few feet away and smiled gently. "Are you okay?" he asked. Samantha shook her head. "No," she admitted, her voice shaking. I dropped something important in the creek. A ring. It belonged to my grandmother. I think it's gone." The young man studied the creek for a moment, his eyes scanning the water carefully. Then he looked back at her. "Maybe it's not gone," he said softly. "Sometimes things aren't as lost as they seem. I can try to help you find it if you want." Samantha blinked, surprised. She had expected sympathy, maybe a few encouraging words, but not this. She hesitated. I don't think it can be found," she said. "The current is too strong, and it's probably already far downstream." He nodded, but there was a determination in his eyes. "It's worth trying," he said. "Even if it seems impossible, sometimes you just need to know you gave it your best effort." Samantha couldn't help but smile, despite her worry. She knew she needed help, and something about his calm determination made her believe he could actually succeed. She told him the story of the ring, of how it had been in her family for generations, and how much it meant to her. As she spoke, the young man listened quietly, nodding at the right moments, asking thoughtful questions. He seemed genuinely interested in helping, not just because of her story, but because he cared about solving the problem. Finally, with a small, playful smile, Samantha said, "I will be yours if you find my ring." She almost laughed at the words. They were meant as a joke, something to lighten the heavy feeling of losing the ring. She didn't expect him to take it seriously, and she certainly didn't imagine that anyone would actually be able to find it. The young man's smile didn't waver. "Challenge accepted," he said simply. There was no arrogance in his voice, no hint of teasing. Just a calm confidence that made Samantha feel a spark of hope. She wondered briefly who he was and why he cared so much, but she pushed the thought aside. Right now, all that mattered was that someone was willing to try. Over the next few minutes, they discussed the best way to approach the creek. The young man studied the water, noting the direction of the current, the shapes of the rocks, and the areas where the ring might have lodged. Samantha watched him carefully, impressed by the way he moved with purpose and thoughtfulness. There was a patience in him, a quiet strength that she had never seen in anyone else. For the first time since losing the ring, she felt a small glimmer of hope. As they prepared to start searching, Samantha realized something else. She was enjoying his company. The worry and panic that had consumed her were still there, but now they were mixed with a sense of anticipation, curiosity, and even excitement. She had no idea how this search would end, but for the first time in hours, she felt a little lighter. They began carefully moving along the creek, stepping from rock to rock, peering into the water, and checking every nook and cranny where the ring might have gotten stuck. Samantha stayed close, offering suggestions and helping where she could, but mostly she watched him. His focus was unwavering, and his respect for the creek and its dangers made her feel that she had made the right choice in asking for help. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the light reflected off the water in bright, dazzling patterns. Samantha's fingers grew cold from the water, and her patience began to waver, but he never lost his calm. He adjusted his approach, trying different angles, wading carefully into shallow areas, and moving stones with gentle precision. Samantha began to feel a deep admiration for his persistence. It wasn't just about finding the ring, it was about the way he approached the challenge, with care, thoughtfulness, and respect. As the afternoon wore on, Samantha began to realize that this moment, this challenge, was about more than a lost ring. It was about trust, about the unexpected ways that strangers could impact our lives, and about the small miracles that could happen when someone believed enough to try. She had no idea if they would succeed, but she knew that the experience itself was something she would never forget. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Samantha felt a mixture of exhaustion and awe. She had lost the ring, but she had gained something unexpected, a glimpse of someone's character, a lesson in patience, and a story she would tell for years to come. She looked at him and smiled, not knowing what the outcome would be, but grateful for his effort. And somewhere deep down, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, her playful promise was about to become something more meaningful than she had ever imagined. After the events at the creek, Samantha could not stop thinking about the young man who had offered to help her. His name was Miguel, and he had introduced himself briefly before they parted that evening, promising he would return the next day to continue the search. Samantha didn't know what it was about him that intrigued her so much. Maybe it was the calm way he moved, or the quiet determination in his eyes, or the respect he showed not only for her but also for the natural world around him. Whatever it was, she found herself replaying every moment they had spent together that day, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and curiosity. The next morning, Samantha woke earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of her small apartment, painting the room in warm shades of gold. She dressed quickly, trying not to show her nervousness, and grabbed a thermos of tea to keep her warm while she walked to the creek. The streets were quiet at this hour, with only the occasional car passing by. Birds chirped energetically, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. Samantha felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. What if Miguel hadn't thought about the ring overnight? What if it was really lost, and she would have to give up on it forever? As she approached the creek, she spotted him almost immediately. Miguel was already there, studying the water with the same careful attention he had shown the day before. He wore sturdy boots, a light jacket, and a small backpack. Samantha noticed the way he moved, every step deliberate, every glance thoughtful. There was no rush in him, yet his presence gave off a sense of quiet urgency. She called out a greeting, and he looked up, smiling warmly. "Good morning," he said. "Ready to continue?" Samantha nodded. "Yes," she said. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her nerves. She handed him a pair of gloves she had brought, hoping they might help him grip slippery stones better. Miguel accepted them with a nod of thanks, and they both knelt by the water's edge. The day stretched before them like a challenge waiting to be conquered. Miguel began systematically checking the creek, moving along the shallow edges first. Samantha tried to help, reaching for stones, peering into shadows, and occasionally wading cautiously into the water. The creek was unpredictable, and the current was stronger than it seemed from the bank. They had to work slowly, testing each area carefully. Sometimes it felt frustrating, especially when they thought they saw a glint of gold only to discover it was a reflection of sunlight. Despite the setbacks, Samantha noticed something remarkable about Miguel. He never complained, never showed frustration, and never rushed. His eyes scanned the water as if he could see beneath its surface, his hands moving with care and precision. He explained to her how he understood the flow of water, how currents could trap objects behind stones, and how patience was more important than strength. Samantha listened attentively, realizing that this was more than just a search for a ring. It was a lesson in persistence, observation, and respect for nature. Hours passed. The morning sun rose higher, and the heat began to make their jackets feel heavy. Samantha's feet grew cold from standing in the shallow water, and she occasionally shivered when the wind brushed across the creek. She felt a little discouraged at times, wondering if the ring had really been washed away. But Miguel's calm determination never wavered. He encouraged her when she felt doubtful, pointing out areas they had overlooked and explaining why it was worth checking them carefully. At one point, Samantha nearly gave up. She sank onto a large rock, staring at the rushing water. "Maybe it's hopeless," she admitted softly. "Maybe it's really gone." Miguel crouched beside her, shaking his head gently. "Nothing is hopeless," he said. "Sometimes we just need to look a little longer, try a little harder. The things that matter most in life are rarely easy to find. But that doesn't mean they're lost." His voice was steady, full of quiet conviction, and Samantha felt a warmth spread through her chest. There was something in the way he spoke that made her believe him, as if his words carried more truth than any she had heard before. They took a short break on a large, flat rock near the middle of the creek. Samantha offered Miguel some tea from her thermos, and they sat side by side, watching the water flow around them. The silence was comfortable, not awkward, filled only with the sound of the creek and occasional bird calls. Samantha realized she was learning more than she expected, not just about the ring, but about patience, trust, and the unexpected ways people could touch our lives. After the break, they resumed their search. Miguel began moving farther downstream, examining small pools where debris had collected. Samantha followed carefully, trying not to disturb the water too much. She noticed how he examined every detail: the shape of the rocks, the tiny swirls in the current, the way leaves and twigs clustered in certain spots. It was methodical, thoughtful work, and it was clear that Miguel was deeply connected to the land around him. By mid-afternoon, Samantha began to feel a sense of camaraderie with him. They laughed quietly when one of them slipped slightly on a mossy rock, joked about who might fall first, and even shared small stories about their lives. Miguel told her about his family, about growing up in a nearby reservation, and about how he had learned to respect the land from his elders. Samantha shared her own stories about her grandmother, about her love for the woods, and about the little adventures she had taken since childhood. With each story, she felt closer to him, as if this search for a ring had become something much more meaningful, a shared experience that neither of them would forget. Even as the sun began to lower in the sky, they continued. Samantha's fingers were numb, her legs tired, but she refused to stop. She had lost hope for the ring itself, but she had gained a determination to see Miguel's effort through. She realized that this challenge was no longer just about the ring. It was about connection, about perseverance, and about witnessing someone's genuine dedication. As the light began to soften, Miguel paused and studied a section of the creek he had passed several times that day. He crouched low, carefully moving a small boulder, and peered beneath it. Samantha held her breath. Then slowly, he reached under the water and emerged with a small, sparkling object held delicately between his fingers. Samantha's heart leaped. She rushed forward, nearly tripping over a rock in her excitement. "Is it?" she began, but Miguel held up the object with a calm smile. "It's here," he said softly. He handed her the ring, now wet but intact, glinting in the late afternoon sunlight. Samantha held it in her hand, tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't believe it. After hours of searching, after fear, doubt, and frustration, the ring was back. She turned to look at Miguel, expecting him to feel pride or satisfaction. But instead, he was smiling quietly, almost modestly, as if he had only done what anyone else should have done. For a long moment, Samantha was speechless. She clutched the ring to her chest, feeling its weight, and then looked up at him. I can't believe you did this," she said. "I really didn't think it was possible." Miguel shrugged slightly. "I told you," he said gently, "nothing is hopeless. Sometimes it just takes patience, attention, and a willingness to keep trying." Samantha smiled through her tears, feeling gratitude, amazement, and something else she couldn't quite name. She had expected a simple favor, maybe a bit of help from a kind stranger, but instead she had witnessed something extraordinary. This was more than a search for a lost ring. It was a lesson in determination, trust, and unexpected connections. As they walked back toward the path leading out of the woods, Samantha realized that she had gained more than just a recovered heirloom. She had met someone whose character, patience, and quiet strength left a lasting impression on her. She realized that the playful words she had said, the ones about giving herself to him if he found the ring, suddenly felt less like a joke and more like the beginning of something meaningful. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, Samantha felt a deep sense of relief, pride, and admiration. The ring was back on her finger, and her heart was lighter than it had been in days. But she also knew that this experience had changed her in ways she didn't yet fully understand. Miguel had shown her the value of persistence, the importance of trust, and the unexpected joy that could come from meeting someone willing to go beyond what seemed possible. As she turned to thank him again, Miguel gave her a small nod, a quiet smile, and then began to walk back toward the creek, already thinking about other ways to help, other small challenges that life might present. Samantha watched him go, feeling a sense of anticipation, knowing that this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of a journey that neither of them would forget. The days that followed the creek incident were unusual for Samantha. Normally, she preferred the quiet rhythm of her own company, the familiar routines of her apartment, and the comforting predictability of her life. But after witnessing Miguel's dedication and patience, she found her thoughts returning to him more often than she expected. She replayed the image of him wading carefully through the rushing water, the way he studied every curve and swirl of the creek, and most of all, the quiet confidence he carried as if nothing in the world could shake his focus. She realized that, somehow, the simple act of retrieving her grandmother's ring had revealed more about him than any words could. Samantha didn't want to admit it, but she was curious. Curious about the man behind those calm eyes, curious about the life he lived, and curious about what had motivated him to take on a challenge that seemed impossible. She wondered if he had done it for her, or if it was simply who he was. Someone who did not turn away from difficulties, someone who valued honor, patience, and persistence. And she couldn't help but feel a strange pull, an invisible connection she hadn't expected. Meanwhile, Miguel was unaware of how deeply he had affected Samantha. To him, it had been a simple matter of helping someone in need, of applying what he had learned from his experiences in the wilderness and from his Apache heritage. Life had taught him that challenges were never obstacles, but opportunities, to grow, to understand, and to show respect. Retrieving the ring had not been about earning praise or attention. It had been about doing what was right. Yet he too felt a subtle shift after that day, a quiet awareness that he had formed a bond with someone who saw him differently, someone who recognized the care behind his actions. Samantha and Miguel began to see each other more often after that. It was never planned. It happened naturally. They ran into one another while walking along familiar trails, while visiting the local market, and occasionally while attending town events. Each meeting was filled with easy conversation, laughter, and shared stories. But there was always a layer of understanding beneath the surface, an unspoken recognition that they had experienced something significant together. It was as if the ring had been a small key, unlocking a connection neither of them had expected. One afternoon, Samantha suggested they take a longer walk along the river, beyond the usual paths. Miguel agreed and they set off early, carrying only a small bag with water, snacks, and a map of the trails. The sun was warm, the sky a perfect shade of blue, and the forest around them seemed to hum with life. Birds darted from branch to branch, squirrels raced along the trunks of trees, and the distant roar of the river echoed through the canyon. Samantha felt a sense of freedom and excitement, a break from the monotony of daily life. As they walked, Miguel pointed out interesting plants and rocks, explaining their significance, how certain herbs could be used for healing, and how the land itself taught lessons about balance and patience. Samantha listened closely, fascinated by the way he spoke, the care in his voice, and the depth of knowledge he carried. She realized that Miguel's connection to the land was not just practical, it was spiritual, rooted in respect, tradition, and understanding. At one point, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking the river, and Samantha gasped at the view. The water sparkled like liquid silver in the sunlight, winding its way through the trees and rocks. Miguel stood beside her quietly, as if he had been there many times before, absorbing the beauty without needing to speak. Samantha felt a sense of calm wash over her, a feeling she had rarely experienced before. In that moment, it seemed that the world had slowed down, leaving only them, the river, and the endless sky above. They continued their journey, talking about their families, their childhoods, and their dreams for the future. Samantha shared stories about her grandmother, the woman who had owned the ring, and the lessons she had learned from her. Miguel spoke about his own elders, about growing up in a community that valued respect for nature and each other, and about the traditions that had shaped him. Samantha realized that, even though their lives had been very different, there were parallels, shared values, lessons learned, and a desire to live with purpose. As the afternoon sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Miguel suggested they rest by a small pool in the river. They sat on flat stones, dangling their feet in the cool water, watching the sunlight reflect off the surface. Samantha felt a quiet happiness she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just the beauty of the river or the warmth of the sun. It was the presence of someone who understood her, who shared a sense of curiosity, respect, and wonder for the world. It was during this rest that Samantha realized something she had been trying to ignore. The playful words she had said about giving herself to Miguel if he found the ring, the words she had thought were a joke, suddenly felt weighty. Not in a way that pressured her, but in a way that acknowledged the depth of their connection. She looked at him, watching the way he seemed entirely at peace, and wondered if he felt it too. But Miguel's expression was calm, almost unreadable, leaving her to interpret his feelings on her own. As they continued their walk back toward the town, the sun dipping lower and painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Samantha noticed that Miguel had become a quiet, steady presence in her thoughts. She realized that the ring was no longer just a family heirloom. It had become the beginning of a story she could never have predicted, a story that involved trust, patience, and an unexpected bond that was slowly forming between them. She felt a mixture of anticipation and excitement, wondering what might come next, but also a sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her life was expanding, opening to experiences she had never imagined. Miguel, for his part, was beginning to notice the subtle changes as well. He had not set out to make a deep impression on Samantha. He simply wanted to help her, but he couldn't deny the quiet pull he felt whenever she was near. There was something genuine about her curiosity, her sense of wonder, and her openness to learning. He respected her for it and felt a growing desire to spend time with her, to share more of what he knew, and perhaps to see if she might be willing to explore a connection that had begun unexpectedly by a simple challenge in the creek. Days turned into weeks and their encounters became more frequent. They explored nearby trails, shared meals, and sometimes just sat in silence, watching the world around them. Each moment was a learning experience, a chance to see the world through someone else's eyes. Samantha began to see life differently, inspired by Miguel's patience, perspective, and connection to the natural world. Miguel, in turn, found a quiet joy in Samantha's company, appreciating her thoughtfulness, her laughter, and the way she seemed to notice the small details that others often overlooked. One afternoon, while they were walking through a sun-dappled grove, Samantha suddenly remembered the playful words she had said when she first met him. "I will be yours if you find my ring." She felt a small blush rise to her cheeks, uncertain how Miguel would react. But when she looked at him, he simply smiled, not in a teasing way, but in a way that seemed to acknowledge both the words and the deeper meaning behind them. It was a smile that made her feel seen, respected, and understood all at once. That moment was quiet, simple, and yet profound. Samantha realized that Miguel's effort to retrieve the ring had been more than just a gesture of kindness. It had revealed his character, his values, and his way of seeing the world. And she realized that she felt a connection to him that went beyond the ordinary, beyond friendship or casual acquaintance. It was a connection rooted in trust, admiration, and shared experiences that neither of them had anticipated. As they made their way back into town, Samantha felt a sense of excitement mixed with reflection. The events of the past weeks had changed her. The ring was back, yes, but the real treasure was the bond that had formed, the lessons learned, and the unexpected ways life could surprise a person when they least expected it. She understood that relationships, trust, and true connection were not built in a single moment. They were built through small actions, patience, and care. And Miguel had shown her all of these things, not through words alone, but through his actions, his determination, and the quiet strength he displayed every day. Samantha knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. The challenge of finding a ring had transformed into a journey of discovery, about herself, about Miguel, and about the world around them. And she could not wait to see where this journey would take them next. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and Miguel grew closer, not through grand gestures, but through quiet moments and shared experiences. Each meeting felt natural, like pieces of a puzzle coming together. They explored familiar trails, visited hidden spots near the river, and sometimes simply sat on a bench in the town square, talking about everything and nothing at all. Their conversations were never rushed. They took time to listen, to notice small details, and to truly understand each other. Samantha began to see Miguel in a new light. It wasn't just that he had found her grandmother's ring, it was the way he approached everything in life. He had a patience that seemed endless, a focus that never wavered, and a gentle strength that made those around him feel safe. She realized that his actions were guided by principles she deeply admired: respect, honesty, and perseverance. And yet, despite his quiet confidence, there was a humility about him that made her feel comfortable, as if she could speak openly without fear of judgment. One sunny afternoon, they decided to hike up a steep trail leading to a lookout point overlooking the valley. Samantha struggled at first. The incline was steep and her legs burned with each step. Miguel walked beside her, offering encouragement without pushing her. "Take it slow," he said, smiling. "The view is worth it, and so is the effort it takes to get there." His words weren't just about the hike. They felt like advice about life itself, a reminder that meaningful things often required patience and determination. When they finally reached the top, Samantha gasped. The valley stretched out before her in all its glory, the river glinting in the sunlight, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the mountains rising majestically in the distance. She felt a sense of awe and freedom, as if the world had opened up just for her. Miguel stood beside her quietly, letting her take it all in. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was grounding, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this vast, beautiful world. They sat on a large rock at the edge of the lookout, sharing water and snacks. Samantha found herself talking more openly than she ever had with anyone. She told Miguel about her childhood, her dreams, and even her fears. She spoke of moments when she had felt lost or uncertain, times when she had wondered if she was capable of overcoming challenges. Miguel listened with genuine interest, never interrupting, and offering words of wisdom only when asked. He shared his own experiences as well. Growing up in a community that valued connection to the land, the lessons his elders had taught him, and the challenges he had faced while learning to navigate both the natural world and the complexities of life. Samantha began to notice the subtle ways Miguel cared about the world and the people in it. He had a knack for seeing things others overlooked: a bird nest tucked carefully in the branches, a small flower growing in a patch of sunlight, or the way a stream wound around stones in a pattern that spoke of patience and persistence. He treated the land with respect, and he treated people the same way. Samantha realized that this respect was not just a habit, it was a reflection of his character, something that had been instilled in him from a young age and shaped every decision he made. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Samantha felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that the feelings she had been trying to ignore were growing stronger. The playful promise she had made about giving herself to Miguel, if he found her ring now, seemed less like a joke, and more like a sign of the bond that had been forming between them. But she also understood that this bond was not something that could be rushed. It had grown naturally, through shared experiences, trust, and understanding. Miguel noticed her quiet reflection and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You're thinking too much," he said gently with a small smile. "Sometimes it's enough to just be here, to watch the world and enjoy the moment." Samantha looked at him and smiled back, realizing that he was right. Life did not always need explanations or justifications. Sometimes, the simplest moments held the greatest meaning. Over the next few days, their relationship continued to deepen. They spent hours walking through the woods, exploring trails that led to hidden waterfalls or quiet glades. Samantha began to trust Miguel in ways she had not trusted anyone before. She confided in him about her hopes, fears, and dreams, knowing that he would listen without judgment. Miguel, in turn, shared stories about his community, his family, and the lessons he had learned from nature. Each conversation strengthened their bond, creating a connection built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared experiences. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Samantha and Miguel sat by the river. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the sound of the flowing current created a peaceful rhythm. Samantha held the ring in her hand, turning it over and over, thinking about how it had brought them together. "I never expected this," she said softly. "I thought it would just be a simple story about a lost ring, but it's become so much more than that." Miguel nodded, understanding her meaning without needing further explanation. "Sometimes the smallest events lead to the biggest changes," he said. "It's not the ring itself, it's what it represents, trust, patience, and connection, that's what matters." Samantha felt a warmth spread through her heart. She realized that he was right. Their journey had started with a playful challenge, but it had grown into something deeper, something meaningful that neither of them could have predicted. As days turned into weeks, Samantha noticed that her feelings for Miguel were becoming harder to ignore. She admired his strength, his humility, and his respect for the world around him. She enjoyed his company, valued his advice, and felt a sense of comfort whenever he was near. Miguel, too, seemed to be experiencing a similar realization. He cared deeply for Samantha, admired her curiosity and openness, and felt a growing desire to be near her, to share experiences and moments that were meaningful and lasting. One afternoon, Samantha invited Miguel to her apartment. She had baked bread and prepared tea, hoping to share a quiet, peaceful afternoon with him. As they sat at the small kitchen table, laughing and talking about small, everyday things, Samantha realized how much she valued these simple moments. They did not need to be extraordinary or planned. The ordinary could be extraordinary when shared with someone who truly understood and respected you. As the evening approached, Miguel stood by the window, looking out at the town and the fading sunlight. Samantha watched him silently, noticing the calm confidence in his posture, the thoughtful expression on his face, and the quiet strength that seemed to emanate from him. She felt a deep admiration for him, not just for the actions he had taken to find her ring, but for the person he was, someone who lived with integrity, patience, and care. Samantha realized that she no longer saw Miguel as a stranger, or even just as the man who had found her grandmother's ring. He had become someone integral to her life, someone who inspired her, challenged her, and made her feel a connection she had never experienced before. And she knew that this bond was not built on one action alone, but on a series of small, meaningful moments, each one revealing a new layer of understanding, trust, and affection. As the night settled over the town and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Samantha felt a sense of peace and anticipation. She knew that their journey was far from over. The playful challenge at the creek had evolved into a meaningful relationship, one built on respect, understanding, and shared experiences. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning of a story that neither of them would ever forget. For the first time in a long while, Samantha felt truly seen and understood. The ring had brought them together, but it was the moments after, those walks, conversations, shared silences, and lessons learned, that had created a bond stronger than either of them could have imagined. And as she looked at Miguel, quietly standing by her window, she felt a sense of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, an unspoken promise that their connection would continue to grow, nurtured by care, patience, and mutual respect. Samantha woke up that morning with a sense of anticipation she could hardly explain. The past few weeks had been full of small, meaningful moments with Miguel, walks along the river, quiet conversations, laughter over shared stories, and the deepening bond that had grown between them. The playful challenge of the lost ring had transformed into something far greater, something neither of them had expected, and today felt like the right day to acknowledge just how important Miguel had become in her life. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were comfortable but reflected the sense of occasion she felt in her heart. As she walked toward the trail where she had first met Miguel, she noticed the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting golden patterns on the path. The forest seemed to hum with life, as if aware of the change that had been taking place, not just in her, but in the quiet connection that had grown between her and Miguel. Every step felt like part of a story that had been unfolding slowly, naturally, and beautifully. When she arrived at the creek where it all began, Miguel was already there, examining the flowing water with the same quiet attention he always showed. He turned as she approached, smiling warmly. "Good morning," he said. "I wasn't sure if you'd come so early." Samantha smiled back, feeling a flutter of nerves. "I wanted to," she replied softly. "I thought it would be nice to start the day here." She took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs. The creek flowed steadily, sparkling in the sunlight, and for a moment it felt as though time had slowed down just for them. They walked together along the familiar path, their conversation light and easy at first, filled with laughter over small stories and observations of the birds and trees around them. But beneath the surface, both of them felt the weight of something unspoken, a sense that today would mark an important moment in their journey together. Samantha felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, wondering how Miguel would respond when she finally spoke her heart. As they reached a small clearing near the creek, Samantha stopped and looked at him. Miguel tilted his head slightly, sensing her seriousness. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. His calm presence had always been a source of comfort to her, and now it seemed to give her courage to speak honestly. Samantha took a deep breath, clutching the small ring in her hand. "Miguel," she began, "these past weeks, I never expected any of this. I thought it would just be about the ring, about a playful promise. But it became so much more. You've shown me patience, care, and kindness that I never imagined I would find in someone. And I realize that I feel something for you, something deeper than I expected." Miguel listened quietly, his expression thoughtful and serene. He took a step closer to her, his eyes meeting hers with a steady, reassuring gaze. "Samantha," he said softly, "I feel the same way. From the moment I saw how much the ring meant to you, I realized that helping you was about more than a challenge. It was about understanding, trust, and connection. And over these weeks, I've come to care for you deeply. More than I expected, even more than I can put into words." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The creek flowed quietly beside them, birds chirped softly in the distance, and the gentle rustle of leaves filled the space between their words. Samantha felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, joy, and wonder. She realized that the bond they had formed was not based on a single act, but on the accumulation of small, meaningful moments. The way he had listened, the patience he had shown, and the quiet respect he had offered at every step. Miguel reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. Samantha felt a surge of emotion at the simple touch, a reminder of how far they had come together. She looked at him and smiled, feeling the depth of their connection and the sincerity of his feelings. In that moment, it seemed that all the uncertainties, doubts, and playful promises of the past had led them to this point, a place of mutual understanding, trust, and affection. They spent the rest of the morning walking along the creek, sharing stories and laughter, but now there was an added layer of meaning to every glance, every gesture, and every word. Samantha realized that she had learned more about herself in these weeks than she had in years. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to recognize the value of patience and perseverance. And she had learned that true connection was built not on grand gestures alone, but on the consistent, quiet actions that showed care and understanding. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, They found a small, secluded spot by the water, where the current formed a gentle pool surrounded by smooth stones. They sat together, feet dipped in the cool water, and watched as sunlight danced on the surface. Samantha felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had someone by her side who shared her values, respected her, and cared for her in ways that felt genuine and lasting. At one point, Miguel picked up a small stone and skipped it across the surface of the water. "Do you remember when we first met?" he asked, his eyes smiling. Samantha nodded, smiling back. "I thought you were just a kind stranger," she said. "I never imagined you'd be such an important part of my life." Miguel chuckled softly. "I think life has a way of surprising us," he said. "Sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes." "A lost ring, a simple promise. Who knew it could lead us here?" Samantha laughed, feeling a sense of wonder at how unpredictable life could be, and how meaningful moments often appeared when least expected. As the sun began to lower, casting golden light across the creek, Miguel turned to Samantha and held her hands in both of his. "Samantha," he said softly, "this journey we've shared, it means more to me than I can say. I don't want it to end. I want to continue discovering life with you, learning from each other, and supporting one another. Will you be willing to share that journey with me?" Samantha felt tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of joy, relief, and anticipation. She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, Miguel, I will. I want that too." The words felt simple yet profound, a commitment to trust, care, and build something meaningful together. She slipped the ring back onto her finger, not just as a family heirloom, but as a symbol of the journey they had shared, the connection they had formed, and the promise of the future they were choosing together. Miguel smiled, gently holding her hands against his chest. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "Life will have challenges, but I know that together we can face them, just as we faced the creek and the lost ring." Samantha nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. They had started with a playful challenge, but it had grown into a bond built on trust, respect, and shared experiences, a bond that would guide them through whatever life had in store. As evening settled over the town, Samantha and Miguel walked back along the familiar trails, hand in hand, feeling a sense of anticipation for the future. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple, reflecting their excitement and hope. Samantha realized that the ring, once a symbol of the past and family history, had become something more. It was a symbol of courage, perseverance, and connection. By the time they reached the edge of the woods, Samantha felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Miguel had not only found the ring, but had also shown her the value of patience, trust, and genuine care. He had taught her that meaningful connections were built through actions, respect, and consistent effort, and she felt grateful for every moment they had shared. They paused at the path leading to her apartment. Samantha looked at Miguel, smiling, and felt a wave of emotion. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for the ring, for your patience, for showing me what kindness and care really mean." Miguel smiled back, a calm and steady expression that spoke volumes. "Thank you for trusting me," he said, "for letting me be part of your life. I feel the same way. You've shown me how meaningful it can be to connect with someone who truly understands and values life as deeply as you do." As they said their goodbyes for the day, Samantha felt a profound sense of gratitude, hope, and anticipation. The lost ring had led to an unexpected journey, bringing two people together in a way neither had anticipated. It had begun as a playful challenge, transformed into a series of shared experiences, and ultimately became a bond rooted in trust, care, and understanding. That night, as Samantha held the ring in her hand before placing it back on her finger, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The ring was more than a family heirloom now. It was a symbol of resilience, connection, and love. And Miguel, the man who had shown patience, determination, and quiet strength, had become an inseparable part of her life. Samantha knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that with Miguel by her side, she could face anything. The lost ring, the creek, the playful promise, they were all threads in a story that had led to something extraordinary. And as she looked forward, she felt a sense of certainty that their journey together was only beginning, a journey filled with trust, care, adventure, and shared experiences that would last a lifetime.